From Tumwater, Washington, going out to the 5 counties and beyond, no shh, it's the TRL Podcast. I'm your perfectly willing podcast host, Annalisa, back for episode 3. And if you've been following along, you might wonder where Chris is on this intro. And unfortunately, Chris flew too close to the sun. He interviewed his superiors for the first 2 episodes, and now he's working in the bookbinding department. And also, April Fools.
Still here.
You're still here.
And happy to still be employed.
I think this is the end of the bit. I do. I think
so too. Yeah,
I think
episode
that
3.
we can be certain that you have a job. And
I can't keep making the same joke over and over again, although I am known for that.
It's getting less funny. And I think that us pranking everybody is the end. So you are the co-host. You're here to stay.
Happy to be here. And Annalisa, what are we talking about today?
Oh, how the turntables. We're talking about EAH.
We are. And what does EAH stand for? Well, we put out a call on social media, and we got some suggestions from our loyal public. Wrong answers only. And we're going to treat you to a few of those before we reveal what it actually is.
This one is the title of my memoir. It's called Eating All Happiness.
Extra arm hair. This patron says, it's a struggle for some. I say body positivity for the hirsute.
Hirsute, is that a real word?
It is a real word. It means extra hairy.
Oh my gosh, I thought it was a typo.
Learn something new every day.
Emus attack haberdashery.
Is it emu or emu?
I think it's emu.
Well, they're both correct.
This person doesn't like us and she wants us to fail. That's what I know is true.
Easy as ham. It's like easy as pie, except ham.
That one's kind of literary too.
Is it?
Like green eggs and ham.
Oh, of course. How could I forget?
Elephants, always hazardous.
You know what's actually always hazardous? Hippos. But that doesn't fit.
No, that would be HAH. That'd be ha.
And my favorite possibility actually comes from ChatGPT. Endless appetite for hot dogs. Describes me perfectly.
That's your memoir right there.
Right there.
I love it. As amusing as all of those are, today the topic of the podcast is...
What the heck is EAH?
Exactly. So tell us who we are inviting on the show today to explain in detail what EAH actually is.
Well, we brought in the experts. We brought in one of our public services managers who oversees most of our EAH-equipped branches. And we brought in the expert on the ground from possibly my favorite TRL branch, Hoodsport. Well, the library manager there is going to come and talk to us as well.
What makes Hoodsport your favorite?
Well, we'll find out about that in just a second, but let's just say it's got great views.
Okay, let's get into it.
All right, we are talking EAH, and I am here with Stephanie, who is one of our public services managers. Stephanie oversees Mason, Grays Harbor, Pacific, and those are the only counties, right?
Yeah,
Did I miss
those
any?
are 3.
All right, great.
3 of 5, yeah.
What exactly does a public services manager do, Stephanie?
Okay, I have a very fun job in Timberland. I get to work with 3 counties and their managers and their support staff. I get to talk to patrons from all over and see what the best kind of library services we can have for them. And I supervise a lot of libraries that have EAH, so I get to help with that topic that we're talking about today.
Thank you. Perfect guest here. And the other guest for this episode is the library manager of the Hoodsport Timberland Library, Annie Bowers. Annie, welcome. Annie has the best office in all of TRL. Is that right, Annie?
Yes, this is very true. It overlooks the Hood Canal. It has windows that open. It's really amazing. I'm quite lucky.
In fact, I could never actually work at the Hoodsport Library. I would not get any work done. If you've never been up there, it's worth the trip. It has easily the best views in all of TRL. So
For
definitely
sure.
check that out. You won't be able to have access to Annie's office, obviously, but you will get access to the same views of the canal. And we're talking about EAH, so let's start with what the heck is EAH?
Explain it to me like I'm 5.
Okay. EAH gives you a key to the library that lets you come in when the staff aren't there.
Perfect.
VIP access.
Kind of, yeah, for sure.
Well, so that's it. We can go home.
Well,
use them.
there's definitely, that's the short version. It definitely, it's not any time staff are not there. It's specifically between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m., 7 days a week, though, which is great. And to get your card, you have to sign up with staff and go through all the rules and agree to behave.
And that's
we
kind of what we're
started-
going to get into today, is these little nuances that don't make it as simple as, you can get into the library after hours, but it is in essence that simple.
And we started by going back and forth a little bit about what EAH exactly stands for. And it stands literally for Expanded Access Hours, which is not a particularly sexy name, in my opinion. And we have had suggestions from staff to mix that up a little bit. I think one of our staff, suggested Anytime Library, but we were like, that's a little too close to Anywhere Library. And we thought of some other potential ideas that it could be called, but none of them are quite as descriptive as Expanded Access Hours, because that is literally what it's doing. It's expanding the access that you have to the library.
Well, and I've noticed from a marketing perspective that when you try to say like library after hours, it has a different connotation
Different
to it.
tone to it,
Or like
yeah.
after hours at the library, it's like, I don't know. So you have to be careful there.
It might not be the behaviors we want. EAH.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
It's funny. I've learned from this that the branding that is kind of in draft form. You've got to be really careful. You come out with the right name, because
Right.
that's going to be it. And Expanded Access Hours is on everything. It's on every brand now. So that's what it's going to be.
Where did the idea of EAH even come from? Is it a commonly practiced thing across different libraries, or is it?
No. So what's really cool about Timberland is we get to explore all kinds of ideas. And we've got administration, we've got a lot of different people. We've got IT people that are just looking at what's out there in library world. And they're always looking for the next thing to help us support patrons in different ways. And so it's one of those ideas that's not out there, but there was a couple of companies that were starting this in libraries and approached us, or we approached them about, what does this look like? What could we do? So there's not a lot of companies that are out there doing it, although we think that's gonna expanded access hours across library worlds. We do have several libraries, neighboring libraries, but also we were talking last year, there was a group in Kansas. There was a library system in Kansas that approached us and said, hey, we see you out there in Washington doing this work. So we gathered together and we said, hey, here's all of our process. Here's what we've come up with. Here's how it works. And probably need to follow up and see if they've done it.
Actually,
I'd love
I
to.
remember when they reached out to us
Yeah.
about that. I wonder if they have
Love to see if they
followed through with it.
followed through. Yeah. So it's not a major practice right now. So that's why we were very excited to offer it.
And I think the initial idea may have actually come from a library in Europe somewhere, maybe in the
Yeah, I think
Netherlands or
so.
something.
Yeah.
It's coming back to me right now
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
they were doing something like this in Europe, with working with maybe the same company, the software company that
Yeah.
does our security cameras and access controls, which is a fancy word for the keypad where you scan your card.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the only other library system I can think of that was doing anything like this is in Fort Vancouver. Is
Mhm.
that right?
Yes.
The Yakult Library down there, which is like a fully staff-free, like unstaffed library, basically, where
Right.
it's very small too, I think.
Yeah.
Very small space, and also rural, so patrons can go show up at the library and pick up their holds or use the space, but it never has a staff person. Whereas in our case, there are staffed hours, and then there are the extra expanded hours.
Yeah. And the cool part is that this gives us so many more hours. If you think about 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. times 7, and that's holidays and weekends, you get 91 hours, where some of our libraries, our smaller libraries, were able to staff at like 27, 28 hours a week. And Elma, I think, is our biggest EAH library right now, and they have 40 hours of staff time. You can think about, we're like doubling, tripling the amount of access to the library. And so that's just really phenomenal.
Yeah, you talk about the number of open hours
Yeah.
that we would be able to offer in lieu of EAH. So if we weren't expanding access in this way, we wouldn't really realistically be able to staff the library from 7 a.m. to 8
91
p.m.,
hours,
7
yeah.
days a week. Certainly not on holidays. I mean, people, no one's coming to work on Christmas Day, for example, or Thanksgiving. But if you want to hang out at the library, you can do that with an EAH card.
Mhm.
I've seen that question come through before. So
Yeah.
pretty cool.
You need to get away from your family on
Yeah,
holidays.
well, there you go.
Go check out your
Perfect.
books.
Yes.
Go sit.
Too much of
Take a break.
discussion happening at Thanksgiving is getting a little too stressful. The library is your refuge.
Place.
Well, and you made me think of two things. One is how many of our branches currently offer EAH, and what is kind of the thought process behind which branches should or can offer EAH and which ones it's just not really a good option for?
Yeah, that's a great question. We started out with trying it as a pilot for a little while in McCleary. So we want to make sure that we thank the city of McCleary every time we talk about this, because they were the first test, and they said yes to this crazy idea that we had about giving more access without staff time.
Because it's not always just a TRL decision.
Right, exactly. So Timberland's made up of city-owned libraries and Timberland-owned libraries. And so it has to, when we work with the cities, it has to be a good agreement. It has to be mutually beneficial, and we come out with something that works for both of us. So with McCleary, it did, and we tried it, and luckily we have wonderful staff there who just took it in stride and said, we're going to try this. We're going to do it. We're going to make it work. We're going to test it. I think, were you second or?
I think Hoodsport was second.
Yeah, Hoodsport was second.
If not third. We were very close in the second wave after the initial testing.
Yeah, and we've just kind of created the processes as we add on libraries, because there's things that happen in McCleary or Hoodsport that maybe weren't for McCleary. So we just kind of, it's an iterative process for us. So we have 11, and there are our smaller libraries. There are rural libraries. And the reason we choose them is...
I think libraries initially were chosen for two main reasons. One, location, the more rural branches that are harder. I live out by Hoodsport, and I'm half an hour from my nearest library. And so if I can go there on my way through town instead of having to make a special trip, that makes my life a lot easier. So places like that where it's harder to get to the library, it's nice to have the more hours. Also, the physical layouts of the branches, and especially in the beginning, how can we set them up to make this work in a way where it's okay to have patrons in the building when we're not there, and we know what to expect.
Right, that's a good point. I know that at some of the branches that we have been working on to add EAH, they've had to install separate doorways or install new doors, because the way you get into one of these libraries is you're granted a key fob, and we'll talk about that in a second. I have a question about that. But you get a key fob, and then you scan it at the door, and that's what lets you into the library. Well, if your door is not set up for that, then we have to get creative. I was at Packwood last week, actually, and saw their EAH set up, and that's an older building, to say the least. That building's been there at least since the 40s or before. And so it didn't really have a real obvious setup for the technology needed for expanded access, access to the building. You can kind of tell that the main door is off limits during those hours, but they have a side door that they've set up and retrofitted essentially to let people in there. So there's obviously the technology component, but depending on how old your building is, we may have to rearrange some things so the cameras can see all of the building, so the door actually works. And you have a meeting room in Hoodsport too, so they also meeting room access controls.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, and getting to the restrooms and hallways, and where is the staff area that we don't want the patrons to be, and figuring out how to separate the space, and lots of door replacements and lots of technology.
So it sounds like it's not just, it's a few things are taken into account. It's, where is the library located? How many hours are you able to staff it each week?
Yes.
And also, could you make modifications to the building, or does the existing building, can it be modified to support EAH?
Right.
So I'm curious, because it sounded like you were either second or third your branch was second or
Yes.
third to do what were your initial kind of feelings about that when it was brought to you?
Personally, I was super excited. I'm still super excited. I think it is so great. We don't have very many hours. We're only open 27 hours a week with staff. But the EAH triples that for us almost, which is great for our patrons. Also, we're just right along the highway. And so if you can stop by the library on your way home, our latest night that we're open with staff is 6:00 on a Friday. But if you get off work in Olympia at 5, it's going to be hard to make it. So it's nice to have that, even if you're just popping in to pick up your holds. So I was thrilled. I was like, yes, we want to do it.
What about patrons? So, I mean, it's good that you were excited. What did patrons how did they receive this information and that this would be a possibility for them?
Most patrons are also very excited. We've had a couple people who, when initially hearing the idea, want to know, like, how are we making this? Well, actually, the question I think we get most is, aren't we afraid people are going to misbehave?
Right.
Which honestly, I'm not. Most of our patrons are extra respectful during the expanded access. They tuck their chairs in after themselves. They throw away all their trash. They keep the place as nice as possible because they really appreciate what we're doing. But also we have security cameras, and even when we're open and staff are there, humans are humans and people are going to behave how they're going to behave. And I don't want us to be coming at library service from we're scared of what might happen. I want us to be providing as much as we can.
Yeah, very well said. And it's not like we're just granting people, giving them a key to the library and turning them loose. You go through a whole
Right.
process of basically, you have to apply for this. It's a special card privilege that you're granted. You have to have a certain kind of account, with a verified address and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do sign people up, you go through the rules and all the things you have to know about that specific location too. So maybe you could take us through how that works. I'm interested in applying for EAH, and actually I did apply for my card in Hoodsport
Nice.
when I was visiting there. So that's when I got my
yeah.
EAH card. Yeah.
You
so
really
I'm
love
familiar
that
with
branch.
the process.
It's beautiful.
You love it so much.
I do. I go there to chill. I don't do any real work, and I didn't that day. So, but yeah, I'm interested in EAH. What's the next steps?
So usually I get real excited. I'm like, oh, yay. And you get to decide if you want a key card, which is just a blank white card, or if you want a little fob you can put on your keychain.
I got the key card, and I confuse it with my Costco card all the time.
Yeah. People will ask if they can write on the card. Don't write, "This is a key to the library."
Important. All right, I wasn't going to do that, but it's good.
If you I put a sticker on mine so I know which one it
That's
is.
good. Okay.
And then I have a sheet of rules, and I will pull out the sheet and I'll look at one and I'll pull out one and give it to the patron so they can look at it. And we will literally go step by step down the rules and explain them all and answer any questions. And then at the very end, I really specifically ask if they does this all sound good? Do you agree to all of this stuff? And as long as they say yes, then we do a couple things in the computer. And the next day they'll be able to get in with their key.
And I think that we even walked outside and
Yeah.
you showed me where the thing to scan your card is, so people know this is where you go. This is the one entrance. And I think in Hoodsport it's just the one entrance.
Yeah,
right?
just the one.
Sometimes they're different, but
Yeah.
How old do you have to be to have EAH?
To have your own expanded access card, you have to be at least 14.
Wow.
And if you have a card, you're supposed to only use it for yourself. You can't let your neighbor borrow it. You can't let your sister borrow it. You can bring with you minor children or anybody that you're the caregiver for.
Mm-hmm.
So that's fine. But if you want to come by yourself on your own, you have to be at least 14 to sign up.
So is that new 14 or has it always been 14?
It was originally 16.
I want to say 16.
I would say
Yeah.
16. Yeah.
And that was after a long discussion with our board. When we were first trying it out in McCleary, they wanted to be a little bit more conservative. We had wanted a lower age originally, but we went with the 16 at their
Recommendation.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then after we had been trying it for a while, we went back to them and sort of had this like proof of concept, and they agreed to lower it.
Do you have a lot of kids that young that want to do EAH?
Where I'm at, it's harder for a 14-year-old to get to our library. Unless they have somebody driving them anyway. So not a lot, but it is nice. We have people who use the library for tutoring. So if the teacher can come in and then the student has their own, that's really helpful.
Well, that kind of segues next into my next question, which is what clever ways are people, what are people doing with their expanded access hours that maybe we wouldn't automatically think of, or just some that are commonly used ways?
I think with that, I'll start out because I know a few of them, but you know a lot more. I'll start out with that. We've got some great success stories where, of course, you can't get to the library. Our hours are usually 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or 10 to 5 or something. And you're working 9 to 6 and you just can't quite get to the library. So I like to say that people you can come anytime. You can come on a Sunday if that's better for you. You can come after work if that's better for you. So I know in one particular situation, I think it was Elma, correct me if I'm wrong, but being able to get to the library after hours or after their work hours helped them to, do resumes and print them and kind of.
I think I remember the one you're talking about. I think that one may have actually been in McCleary early on too.
Yeah.
I know there was an effusive email about how beneficial this person found it in being able to basically use the library for job search purposes, and then they
got a job, and then we love these stories when they come back and tell us that they got a job because of our help or our service. Yeah, so
really reaffirms the decision that we made to go down this road.
Exactly,
it's a lot of work, but when people tell you like, I used this, I can point to this and say this helped me get a job. Well, that's great to hear.
Yeah, and we'll have as Annie's saying, when you're a caregiver for somebody, you might need to bring them out of the house for a little bit and have something for them to do. So you can bring them to our youth spaces, which we talked about on the last podcast.
Right.
So you can bring them to our youth spaces and let them have some free time. And it might, you might pick a time when it's not as busy. So your kiddos can have like the full experience, or if they need anything additional there, that you can kind of have somewhere to go as a third place, as a community space. It's safe.
When you knew you were coming on the podcast, I know you were looking at a lot of statistics.
Yes.
Being very prepared.
Yes.
Good on you. Can you tell me which of the branches gets the most usage these days?
Yeah. So our three, I have like large users, heavier users, are our Ocean Park, which is down on the peninsula in Pacific County, Elma, which is in Grace Harbor, and McCleary
was the other one, right?
Is the original one. So of course they've had a lot of time they've had 3 or 4 years to like gather up how many people are in McCleary and make sure they all have a card and a key fob. So Elma, Ocean Park, McCleary, they all kind of vie for that top spot each month and see who can use their library the most. I think we're probably about 200 plus actual separate uses.
The Ocean Park
for Ocean Park and Elma,
those two were like pretty close, 250, 234 or something like that.
Yeah, but we have over 1,200 registered active cards in McCleary and Ocean Park and Elma. So those are pretty good stats for those three. And the others are getting used. It's just about they're newer, so they're newer to the EAH process.
Yeah,
so it's
that's
like
part of why we were
spreading
wanting
the word.
to talk about it on the podcast, is because when you talk about, what is expanded access hours, like the name, like we were saying, doesn't really convey what it is. Yeah. And it's hard to explain in writing. We have a webpage about it, and we did a little kind of introductory video, but it's hard if you're not talking to people face to face at the library to really get the word out about what it is specifically and how it could benefit you, and if you live in one of these communities.
We encourage word of mouth too, because I think families will talk to each other and friends will talk to each other about how to get this. And the fact that we just want to stress that it's so easy. I was down in Owaka, one of my libraries, and I was like, I think I should get one of these after 3 years. I should get one of these. And it was amazing because I got it in Owaka, but then the first time I used it was Hoodsport. So I was able to get in and do some work just easy peasy, passing through. And so you can use the same key fob for all the libraries that have expanded access hours. So if you were on vacation in Amanda Park and you needed to print, that's another story we have, is a lot of people are on vacation in Amanda Park, but they live in Olympia, for example. So they can use our printers to print something and fax it and scan it on their time and not have to go back to Olympia to do it.
It's good that you bring that up, because I know when we were first doing this, you had to go to a branch that has expanded access hours to apply for the card.
Yeah,
but lately we've changed that. So now you can go to any branch. So if you live in Lacey, but you sometimes go out to Pacific County, spend some time in Long Beach, Oahu, Ocean Park area, you can get your expanded access card in Lacey, and you can use it at any of the EAH libraries along the way. So you could stop in Elma, you could stop in Ocean Park, Oahu, wherever you're going, and use your EAH card.
Easy.
How are people in Hoodsport? How are your patrons in Hoodsport using EAH, do you find?
We get a lot of people using the copy machine. We get a lot of people using the computers, doing Zoom meetings at the library, stopping by to use the restroom as they're driving through to go camping.
A clean,
also very important use of the library, totally legitimate.
Those are hard when you're in that area.
There are no public bathrooms in Hoodsport right now.
I've experienced that personally.
Yeah. I think that's a good point of there's no, usually in our areas for EAH, there's no public bathroom elsewhere. There's no printing elsewhere. There's no computer Wi-Fi elsewhere. So there's meeting space or youth spaces, you can go. So I think that's really a good reason why we have this in all of those, rural locations.
Mm-hmm. You're so right. And some of these branches have Xbox.
That's right.
So as a parent, you could bring your kids of all different ages, and you have the kids in the kids area and your older kids that are doing Xbox, and you can just be chilling and reading a book in a quiet space. Oh, it sounds so nice.
One of the things I've experienced working in some of the more rural branches, I was in Winlock for about 3.5 months in 2018 when the library manager left there. And that was new for me because I'd previously worked in larger buildings, but you'd see a decent amount of usage, people coming by. But I'd say the majority of people, maybe 8 out of 10 people, are coming to pick up a hold, use the computer, sit and read a magazine or the newspaper, and they don't need anything from the staff there. So that's something that I know we've considered when adding expanded access hours, is that there are lots of people who could make use of a space who actually don't really need to interact with anyone at all, but just making it available gives you the option to come to visit the library, on your own terms. So if you work a 9 to 5, or our staffed hours don't work for you, we don't want to lock you out of the library. Basically, we give you an option to come visit.
And we'll teach you everything about what's in the library. If you're worried about how to get the printer going when we're not there, we can teach you that. We can walk you through it. That way you feel comfortable being by yourself in the library, and you know what you need to know to make that a success. So our staff are always wanting. I think your staff are always wanting to teach how to do EAH. Yeah.
Well, now you were talking about how you hope people are using, word of mouth to talk about EAH. And I think those are good conversations to have, because I think, we can have a web page, we can talk about it on social media, but those really conversations, because I think the first thing that comes up is, the behavioral aspect of it. You're just going to let people in the library. So now we can say we have 11 branches who are doing this and have done this successfully, and have those kind of conversations with people to meet them where their concern might be, and say, that's a valid concern, but, here's this data that we have and how long we've been doing it at all these different branches, and it's been successful.
Yeah. And like a lot of things in the library, most things in the library, we're not making people come when the staff aren't there. This is an option that's available for people who want to take it. But if you're not comfortable, or it makes you feel worried, then come when we're there. We love to see you. We'd be happy to help you.
And kind of speaking to that, your earlier question was, how do we decide what libraries can have this? And it's all of the things that we said before, but it's also safety. And our branches, we are very aware of where our branches are on just different types of safety measures. Maybe we call them incidents, or things that might happen at the library if you go. And so we have processes and procedures for if things happen to go sideways while you're at the branch. We definitely encourage you to report to us anything that you see while you're in expanded access hours. And you're very much encouraged to take care of your own safety as far as like if you feel like you need to call in some extra help, or we absolutely want you to do that. It's kind of like a empowering you to be part of the library and be in that space and do what you need to do. Take ownership of that space. Look out for community. And so we very carefully consider who gets to which library is, and based on the safety, can we help provide that safe space?
Mm-hmm. And, we were also pretty zero tolerance on, misbehavior during unstaffed hours. Though I think the only thing I've seen in my experience with this is the thing that people do that they're not supposed to. Sometimes they'll let someone else into the library on their card, and basically you get one warning, and after that you're revoked.
Yeah.
So I know that's emphasized. Yeah,
we definitely see that, and it's more about being neighborly. You've got somebody walking up behind you, and you know them, like, oh, hey, that's so-and-so, that's Joe. I know him. He's going to be fine. We want you to be neighborly, but we want to make sure that the point is that we know who's in the library at a certain time.
Exactly.
So your card is attached to your swipe, and that way we know you were in the library from, for an hour or for 5 minutes or something. And then that way if someone comes in behind you and we don't know them, it's a little bit harder to tell. But if we do know every swipe and we can match it on camera of who's coming in, that can help us just make sure that everybody is kept to a standard of safety. And we're not actively like watching. We don't police it or but when things...
You don't come to the library the next day and watch all the camera footage from the day before.
No,
like, oh, Bill was reading the paper for 15 minutes.
Very cognizant of patron privacy and confidentiality on that. But also like with this balance of monitoring for safety and looking out for each other.
Or
too.
if, when you come in and you notice, oh, all the chairs are on one side of the building. This is weird. I think I'll check the camera.
Yeah.
Or,
usually leave some kind of sign like, I'm going to go see.
This looks like cat hair. That shouldn't be in the library.
And as this new system happens, we do want to talk to the people who are letting someone else in, and we say, just a reminder, that's your... that's why we keep it, is how we are able to keep it safe, is if we can have everyone swipe their card. And so it usually doesn't get higher than that. Yeah.
And we also very specifically tell people that all the rules that apply while we are here apply while we're gone. So if you wouldn't do it when I'm standing here, don't do it when I'm not. And that's part of the sign-up process, to let them know. Just because we're not watching doesn't mean you get to be naughty.
The eye in the sky is watching you. Yeah.
Well, I think maybe one of the last things that we haven't really touched on is EAH from a budget perspective, and how that was taken into account when this was put into motion.
Sure. I think staff is always going to be our most expensive part of running a library. So getting more staffed hours is really hard to be able to afford. But this is a one-time cost to get all of the electronic bits installed. And it is so much more access for our patrons. So it is expensive at first, but in the long run, it's possible, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, podcast listeners can eagerly await the future episode on library budgets, because we're already talking about doing that for plenty more detail in that area. But yeah, you're right. The staffing and collections are the two biggest expenditures. And the collection's not getting any cheaper. Ebooks are egregiously expensive and are only getting more popular. And of course, staffing is always a challenging thing to afford. So you're right. If you're going from staffing a building 27 hours a week, and that's about as good as you can do based on usage statistics and where that library is located, but then you can take that up to 91 by adding, the technology necessary to do expanded access hours. That's a pretty big jump.
Something for everybody, yeah.
I know that when we initially started doing this in McCleary, I feel like we were publicizing it pretty heavily, and talking about it to both the McCleary community and also to TRL at large. And I know that at that time, some patrons in other communities had asked, are we going to get this? Can we get this?
Yeah.
And so we've of course been adding branches ever since. But it's nice to hear people ask for it when it's not in their community.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
we've added it where I think all the branches we own that are owned by Timberland. Salcombe is one
Yeah.
that comes to mind that
Yeah.
just recently came online, where by the time this episode airs, actually today, Amanda Park went live. But not all of the libraries have it. We do, cooperate with the city. So if we're in a relationship with the city where Timberland doesn't own the building, we do go to the cities and make sure that they're cool with it. So in some cases, the city hasn't been cool with it. No, Winlock wasn't cool with it, so we didn't add EAH there. So Winlock people, if you're interested in having EAH, talk to your city folks. We'd love to install it.
And yeah, I mean, the process just gets easier as we've gone on. It's been 3 or 4 years now. We have kind of an internal committee that looks at different situations. We've got like we built the processes and standards for this as we went along, and we kind of review it and make sure that it's still where we need it to be. And then of course there's this little things that pop up like, oh yeah, we didn't, that we need to make sure we've got a kind of a process around that, or what do we do when that happens? So it's like standard and so just refined.
A lot of documentation.
A lot of documentation we did. Yeah. It's just a good refined process now, and we can roll it out pretty quickly.
Yeah, there was a library director from another system who they're looking at it in Washington, and our director, Cheryl, sent me a message to send them all the documentation that we have on EAH.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of documentation. So here in the next few days, they're going to be getting an email with a lot of attachments, let's just say.
Good.
As kind of a closing activity, I thought it would be nice if we could share any patron stories that either of you have heard, feedback from your local patrons, feedback via email that from other EAH libraries across the district. I know people use it in all sorts of fun and unique ways. And Annie, I know you have one queued up.
We have a patron who uses the expanded access every single day. She comes in, she's writing her life story. She was doing this at the library before we had expanded access, and every night at closing would have to scurry around and try and finish up her paragraph so she could leave on time. And now we just say, hey, we're locking up, and she'll go outside and scan herself in with her card and keep writing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's kind of amazing, because say she finishes it, we hope and assume that she will, then we will be able to say that this patron wrote her life story largely using EAH to do it. That's kind of amazing.
Yeah. She was actually the first person we signed up at the Hoodsport
Can't believe it.
branch
This will
for
be
the
perfect
card.
for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for telling us everything that we need to know about EAH, why it's working out so well for us. And it sounds like there might be more EAH locations coming in the future.
We hope so.
Today, as of today, we have 11.
Mhm.
And so that's really exciting to think about too.
Yeah.
Just ways that we are reaching more patrons and giving them more access to the library is awesome.
Meeting their needs where they need them instead of, you come to the library on our time. It's on your time. It's beautiful.
Perfectly said.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode. Don't forget to follow or subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more listeners.
You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Timberland Library. If you have any questions or comments, you can email us at trlpodcast@trl.org.
Original music is by our very own librarian and talented musician, Stefan, at the Yelm Branch.
Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep the conversation going. Thank you for being a part of the TRL community.